Hello there, I'm Adam Forbes. I am the host of the Corporate Escapology podcast and the author of Corporate Escapology, the book, now in 3D. And today, my guest is Joe McKay. Joe is a ghostwriter. He writes for other people on LinkedIn, typically, who don't particularly want to write their own content and have what he describes as fear of posting online. So he does it for them. But he hasn't always done this. In fact, he started his career with a very sort of numerate engineering economic background, and he thought that was his bias. But over the time, what you'll hear from the podcast is Joe has moved into lots and lots of different roles. He's worked in corporates, consulting, he's worked for startups, he's worked in government several times, he's worked in sports a lot. But all those experiences have led up to his decision fairly recently to make this a new career. So he started to work for himself. He spent 12 months really proving the concept as a side hustle to make enough money, build clients. But I think he's a great example of what we can all do when we're in our jobs to get ready for the change that we may want to make, but we feel is very high risk. He's got a young family, but he's found a way to build stability and to a degree of predictability to his life through using some of the skills that he's developed. So let's meet Joe now. Well, thanks for joining me today, Joe, on the Corporate Escapology podcast. Great to have you here on a hot Friday afternoon. So one of the things I'm really interested in talking to you about is the juxtaposition of a number of the things that you've done throughout your career. And it kind of starts with this, what you studied, economics and engineering. So tell me a bit about why you went down this sort of quite dual route and how that helped you work out what you wanted to do next.
Yeah, look, thank you for having me on. That's going back a while now, the university days, but I think when I reflect on it now, the stories we tell ourselves are so interesting. Like in high school, studied engineering and physics and science and did a fair bit of maths, but I also did French and English, and my best marks in high school were actually French and like quite advanced English, but I just had in my mind that I was better at maths and engineering and the sciences, and so went into that at university. Did economics as well, just because I had good enough marks, and most of my mates were doing commerce or business, so I'd kind of have some classes with them. And then I really struggled. I remember getting 23% in one of my first year maths classes. Grinding all the way through engineering, like making friends and sharing notes, and just figuring a way to kind of get through. Because I'd told myself this story, I guess that was kind of the type of brain I had. I was a numbers person, and it wasn't necessarily true, and I've meandered across a whole bunch of different things since then, and have found myself much more on I always forget which side of the brain is which, but on the more kind of, I guess, written and verbal side of things now than the numerical side.
So did you hold on to that story into your first couple of jobs then as well? Did that kind of persist, or did you learn from the university that actually, this isn't me, I need to get out of it and do something?
No, look, I found myself on a bit of a conveyor belt. It's sort of then towards the end of university becomes, what's the internship or the graduate role that you can get that tends to follow your studies. So I found myself as an engineering intern at the railways in Sydney, where I lived at the time. From there, kind of moved into procurement, which is another fairly numerical sort of space, and management and consulting and this kind of thing. So yeah, I definitely carried that idea of being the numbers person for a while. I finally ended up in a marketing agency, but in a business operations function. So again, very much responsible for budgeting and all the numerical stuff. And I told myself, and I let people around me kind of tell me that I wasn't creative as such.
Yeah, that's right, because those two things sort of go, don't they? You're either a numbers person or a creative person, and there's no kind of like intersection between those two, which of course is rubbish as well. But if you found yourself in the wrong camp, then it's kind of, it's effort, isn't it? I mean, it's lots and lots of extra effort to keep average. So that's what I found. I had a stint in finance, which I will never forget. I don't even know why I ended up there, but I did for 5 years as well. And when I look back, I just think the extra effort that I was putting in just to kind of be average was just, well, it's ridiculous. I didn't realize it until I went to find something that was more my, played to more my natural strengths. It's like, oh my God, not only can I do better work here, but actually the load on me is so much lower than it was. So yeah, so how were you sort of feeling during that time of working in this area that maybe wasn't your natural lean, but you kind of thought it was?
Yeah, look, I think early on, like very early in the piece, fresh out of university and first couple of jobs, you're really trying to figure out what you are good at, and you're learning and you're, yes, you've got that mental energy to burn as well. There's not much else going on in life necessarily, so I found myself able to invest pretty heavily in work. And then the other aspect, when I was in sports marketing and that space, like it depends on how you fit within the team as well. So compared to a lot of the people that were around me that were much more that kind of, or much less numerical, I was probably in a good position to help, like relatively speaking, even though it wasn't maybe a core strength, but kind of relative to the rest of the team, I was well placed to be able to help. And so I didn't necessarily kind of question it too much at the time. Just I guess got on with the role. And that's not to say that, every day now is easy or I always know kind of what to write next or what to do next either. It's just been an interesting kind of 180-degree turn, I guess.
Well, let's just dive into it a bit. So what did you do then? So the railways was the first thing, but you moved around quite a bit. Didn't you? Was that kind of just trying to find where you were most successful, what you enjoyed the most? Or was there something else going on driving some of those moves?
I think the public sector for me as like a 21-year-old just wasn't the pace and the energy level that I wanted. So I found myself pretty quickly feeling quite stagnant in that and just looking for, what's the next thing, I guess. And the really simplistic and I think overly simplistic and not necessarily helpful kind of advice that's often out there is, what are you passionate about? Go and work in something that you're passionate about. And for me, that's always been sport. So I kind of just put that up on the wall as a thing where it's like, I love sport in my personal life. In my free time, I love to do sport. So why not just make that a job in some way? So that kind of became a focus for a while. I moved to the UK and worked in kind of events roles around sport, some of the biggest sporting events in the world, which was incredible. And I think it was really just...
What sort of things were you doing? Sorry, what sort of things were you doing on those events?
So at Wimbledon, I was the staffing manager for all, there's like 250 uni students that work in the merchandise outlets during the tournament. So basically responsible for recruiting and onboarding them, then kind of managing their rotas and their training and all that kind of stuff throughout the tournament. And then I moved into a kind of a catering staffing management role at Lord's, the cricket stadium, and was in a broadcast role on the Rugby World Cup, which was in London in 2015 as well. So fairly varied roles. Really in major events, you'll kind of do anything as a young, like when you're in your 20s and you just love sport, you kind of do whatever's needed to be involved in some way. So it was a lot of fun, but very draining as well.
And did you get a sense, did you think while you were doing those roles that this was a career, or was it just a series of really fun jobs that were getting you into these amazing sporting events?
Yeah. Look, I think at the time, definitely working in the sports industry, and for a long time, my goal was to become a player agent. So that was definitely something I kind of had in my mind as a goal, like as a dream job. And so everything I was doing was trying to move towards that. It's obviously a fairly niche kind of thing to get into, and it's hard to figure out where your break's going to come from. So the attitude at the time was really just, how close can I get to that world? How much can I soak up and learn about that world? But at the same time, I was living overseas from my, out of my native country and just, in my mid to late 20s, just enjoying life really and not thinking too far down the road either.
But you must have decided at a point, okay, this isn't for me. So what came next?
Yeah, well, so once I actually found my way into a sports sponsorship and marketing agency and got to know talent agents and got to understand kind of what the day-to-day looks like for player agent, I realized that that wasn't necessarily going to be the best fit for me. And one thing I would say is, like, reflecting on that as well, I've always been resourceful and quite opportunistic. Like, that opportunity presented itself. I thought, why not? I can have a look at that, give that a go, in quite a practical way. It was the same thing when I kind of set up Dodgeball Sydney, which was just a social dodgeball league, because I wanted to play dodgeball, even to what I'm doing now. I've always had a bias towards action and kind of push myself into, and that's why I've gone in so many different directions, because I kind of just play what's in front of me, I guess. And if there's an opportunity there that I think I might be able to make something of, I'll give it a go and be open to failing or changing my mind later or seeing what happens next.
That's really interesting, because so one of the things that I'm really keen to explore is always confidence, because I just feel like it's just like such a key ingredient to success in life. And an assertion I would make is your confidence was probably reasonably high during that period, because you were moving around and being successful enough in each of those roles. And, and once we're tested like that and we come through it, our confidence builds versus not being tested, and we start wondering, actually, are we any good at this? And people don't start challenging us with new things. We start just doing the same things and the routines set in. So what was that? What was your confidence like at that period for you? And how did you feel about, so you're opportunistic, but did you sort of step into these things thinking, I can probably do that?
I did. And I think I don't know if you've heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where, the less competent you are, the more likely you are to believe that you're competent. And so I think it's partly, youthful, entrepreneurial spirit, bit of the Dunning-Kruger, and just being willing to give stuff a go. I wasn't confident on every day, in every role and that kind of thing, but I think there's privilege to it as well. I guess the reality for me, with the background that I've had and being, a man and being white and being kind of cisgender and all these different things that kind of this invisible hand of privilege, I guess, that has given me over the years opportunities, and I have been able to kind of turn them into something, not necessarily through my own brilliance, but through the privilege of being given a chance because of, how I look or where I went to school, or, whatever the privilege kind of looks like. So I've become much more aware of that as well in recent times, that not everyone gets the chance to take the opportunity, is not even presented with the opportunity in the first place. So, a lot of it was, just not my control and nothing I did.
Yeah, okay. There's some, I like the humility there. There's obviously some things you did too to take those opportunities and do something with them. But I accept the point, definitely. Tell me, so this sports agency you went to, because what was that doing there? And that, I imagine it's quite difficult to get into something like quite competitive. They've got a stream of people who want to do this kind of work. So how did you stand out, and then what did you do once there? Was that back in Australia by then as well?
Yeah, so that was back in Australia. So look, when I worked as a management consultant, I'd spent about 2 months there and realized that wasn't going to be for me. I every Friday would call the receptionist at this sports agency to ask to speak to the head of the agents, the player agents at the time. And every week, whenever I called, he was surprisingly never available. Anyway, I kind of went off and did my thing, moved to London, got into the sports jobs, and that business had a UK arm. It was a cricket representation business, so cricketers in the UK as well. So I reached out on LinkedIn to the UK based agent and just did the same thing, just pestered him and pestered him until we could have a chat. And that was like a 2-year process. And eventually the guy that I'd been trying to reach in Melbourne showed up in London for Wimbledon or for the cricket or something, and I managed to finally kind of get a meeting with him, and then just didn't let it go. I just kept on emailing and nudging and following up until finally probably he got sick of me and connected me with someone in the sponsorship business as a bit of a way in. So it was a lot of persistence and just not being afraid to kind of annoy people to try and break in, really, and always done with good intentions and in a polite way. But just, I guess, not accepting no the first 25 times.
And so what did you do? What kind of work did you do there, and how long were you there?
Yeah, so I spent around 3 years there, and I was in the sponsorship and events team. So basically we would help brands who were sponsors of major sports properties to leverage their sponsorships. So we were running campaigns on major football tournaments with some of the supermarkets in Australia, for example, some of the fuel brands who were sponsors of national teams or competitions. So very much a direct-to-consumer sponsorship marketing role, which, took me all over Australia, took me to the UK, took me to some of the world's biggest events in sport, and was amazing, and taught me heaps about direct-to-consumer marketing and kind of how big brands and big organizations think about their marketing, and even the politics and the internal machinations that go with that kind of thing as well. So really interesting place to be. And
you were doing what specifically? What was the kind of, you were like actually doing the campaign development? You were copywriting? What sort of things were you doing?
So a whole bunch of different things, really. If you picture like a fairly crazy scatterbrain marketing agency where everyone's just doing a bit of everything, that's kind of what it was. So, I started out as basically like the EA to the boss, then started kind of helping with the budgeting and the finances, and kind of went into operations management. And then, if there were too many clients and not enough account managers, and I was running some accounts and some clients as well at different stages. So, that's the beauty of that kind of environment, is you do 3.5 jobs in one every week. And I realized just how much was possible, like how much you could actually do in a week. I remember kind of walking into those government roles and just wondering what I was going to do all week, to then the completely opposite of just how am I going to get everything done this week. It was almost a lesson in kind of bending time, I guess.
Yeah, and again, linked to the confidence. I mean, I think in those sorts of things, generally speaking, your confidence just soars. You're just doing so much, and you're just getting so much delivered, and having such impact, versus those jobs where you're doing so little and you're twiddling your thumbs and you're making every job take twice as long, and you end up not even doing a very good job sometimes in those when you've got more time, where you do a much better job when you've got 10 minutes to do it and you just put everything into that 10 minutes, but it's delivered and gone, and then you're on to the next thing. I just think, your confidence just like builds and builds.
I would definitely agree with that, although I would say that the most significant and kind of acute episode of imposter syndrome and anxiety I've ever had at work came in that role. And I vividly remember this day. We were pitching a campaign to a car brand. I remember just sitting at my desk, in the kind of the hours leading up to this meeting, and I literally was having this recurring vision of the client like walking in and just tapping him on the shoulder and telling me I had no idea what I was doing, and what have you done with? Are you honestly suggesting we do this with all our money? And it was only on speakerphones at the time, but just I was kind of having this nightmare about walking into the conference room to do the pitch, and I was absolutely convinced I was getting fired. I was absolutely convinced we were going to lose the client and I was going to lose my job, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And I was almost in tears at my desk. Like and I've never been like that before or since. And I don't know why it was that particular day or that particular situation, but that day confidence was not high. But overall, definitely agree.
It sounds like it was isolated rather than something that persisted.
Yeah, look, it was, ironically, it's so funny how these things work, because the client was really, really nice. Like, she was very friendly, and there was no reason, like no logical reason for me to be that stressed. And I remember we kind of went through the first idea, me and kind of my boss on the account, and she was like, cool, like, let's look at the rest of the ideas, but this first one is awesome. Let's do that. And so kind of within the first few minutes, we the tension was lowered, and it never really happened again. Don't know where that came from, but live and learn.
If you're in, you don't have that very direct contact. All your contact is really just internal with other people in the organization who may not give you very direct feedback, because it's maybe not in their interest, or the culture's not set that way to be very, very direct. I think you can be left wondering for a long time with that imposter syndrome, sitting with it, and it can build sometimes unconsciously to the point when it suddenly hits you, a really bad moment, for example. Whereas what you were, but when you're client facing like that, I think there's a lower risk of it hitting you super hard like you had, although it can happen, of course, but at least you were able to bat it away the day after and just say on your bike, because, she loved it, therefore I'm not going to get fired, at least.
Yeah, and I think in the opposite situation, when you are kind of just doing some kind of internal function, you don't necessarily have that really direct response. In the worst case, you find yourself over-interpreting all these different little signals and reading into things that aren't there, and, oh, she's cancelled the meeting again, or she's late for our one-on-one again. Like, what does that mean? All those little things that do go through your head, particularly related to what your kind of day-to-day boss could do or not do. I think that's definitely something that's happened.
It's really funny, isn't it? You end up, these people that are your bosses have disproportionate power to just an influence to a normal conversation. So every sign that's conscious or unconscious they're making can have huge implications for you. And you can easily read loads into it that just isn't there. They're just having a bad day. They're thinking about something going on at home. They're thinking about something else going on at work. You are actually very minor in their life at the moment. But because they're major to you, they can create these huge swings, just like they can create lots and lots of work with just throwaway remarks, because the power that they hold. And I think that over time, layered up, particularly like me, well, it's like a long time in one company, it can really sort of like really push you down and squash you, I think. So to the point when you're almost hyper alert, just, any kind of signal, you overanalyze and can find yourself in a state easily. Imposter syndrome kind of state can kick in, if not a whole load of other anxieties that you might have that may be totally unfounded.
Well, and to be honest, that's where and why I've landed where I am today, which is working for myself, by myself, because I've tried public sector, I've tried private sector, I've tried very big organizations, I've tried very small organizations. I worked in startups, trying to find an environment, with a boss and a leader and a team around me that I feel comfortable. And I wasn't able to, I changed all the variables I could kind of think of, and never really was able to feel super comfortable in those relationships for an extended period of time. So now I'm in this phase or this season of life at the moment where it's up to me, and I don't have to worry about that external noise, I guess.
Was there an actual trigger then for you to leave? Was there something that made you think, actually, I think I'm going to try something going on my own? Or was it, was it gradual and you were working towards that?
A little bit of both. So I've always had this kind of, bias to action, this willingness to try things for myself and build things and fail. And I couldn't tell you how many kind of failed business ideas I've had along the way, from, I was going to start my own talent agency to the dodgeball thing to sports boot camps, all sorts of different stuff. So that's always bubbled away in the background. for different reasons, kind of left the marketing agency that I was in, and kind of the next logical opportunity that presented itself in front of me was to go back into government, into the state tourism organisation, Destination New South Wales, and that played a great role in when I was starting a family. Obviously, with hindsight, COVID just wiped out the sports industry for a couple of years, and that really insulated me from that. But after about 2 years again of gradually shrinking, from that what I was capable of in a week, and that just gradually shrinking over time, in a slower pace, it wasn't the place for me to be anymore. Coincided with my wife being pregnant. She's from France, and so we just decided to pull the pin. I was going to leave my role, and we were going to move to France. And I managed to line up, again, just another kind of opportunistic thing. I managed to line up like a 2-month freelancing project, which was basically going to fund the trip, and just at least help us break even for that next phase of life, I guess, and just push the decision down the road a little bit further.
Wow. Yeah, but still, I mean, it was a pretty bold move. So you gave up the steady job in the government job, and and prioritized family and connection back home for your wife particularly. And so what are you doing there? You carrying on? So the freelancing thing, are you thinking it's to do with sports still? What are you planning?
So that that particular project was really around a piece of marketing work for a B2B SaaS kind of startup. So this business was a supplier. I was the key contact of a supplier at Destination New South Wales, and built a relationship with this startup, and had some ideas about how we could collaborate together on a new way to add value and kind of a new offering to take to market. So it was a 2-month project around kind of building that and marketing that. Beyond that, I guess the hope was that would turn into something kind of more long-term and ongoing. And that is what ended up happening. So I basically did the 2-month project. Relationship was good, felt like a good business. And then but I took 6 months off, for the birth of our son. And then basically on our return to Australia, joined that business full-time as a kind of marketing team of one. And did that for about 12 months.
Oh, I see. So the French trip was just a temporary move to come to France, just for the birth of the first.
Yeah. So my wife had basically taken maternity leave. Yeah.
I see.
So we couldn't completely cut ties and kind of just give everything up. We kind of had her, I guess, salary and her stable job as sort of the anchor point. Took maternity leave to enjoy France while we could, but then eventually the dream was over, and we had to head back and kind of get back into the swing of life with a mortgage.
Yeah, those realities and those kids that really force the realities as well. So came back to Australia and picked up the job with a startup this time. So you had the full kind of range of demands on your time as a startup, where you're doing everything. So how was that? And how did you use what you'd learned from other roles to perform there?
Yeah, so it was a really good role. It definitely was very hands-on and a lot of stuff to do. I think what I found, by this point I was maybe 33, and relative to the team around me, again, like I was actually older than the founder, older than the rest of the team in there. So I found myself as being almost the kind of senior head, I guess, in the business, and wanting to, or able to, I guess, just have my voice heard a little bit more and have some more say and some more direction. So that was really interesting. But I had actually in the downtime, in the 6 months off that I'd had, that's where the a lot of my journaling and my writing and my posting on LinkedIn had started. So I'd kind of taken that free space in between nappies and bottles and things to start jotting down ideas and thoughts and start sharing them. And the this kind of seedling of an idea of this solopreneur kind of lifestyle had started bubbling away during that time. So I was doing some LinkedIn ghostwriting and kind of working on this side hustle on evenings and weekends around the day job in the startup.
Really? Okay. So tell it. What were you ghostwriting? For whom were you ghostwriting? What kind of stuff were you doing?
So really, it started with an old boss from my failed bid in management consulting. I basically pitched to him. I think it was $500 for 10 posts. Was where we started, just kind of sharing some of his story and some of his insights. And from there, did a bit of outreach on LinkedIn to people in my network, like professionals that I knew. And then relied on some referrals as well, like told a few key people about what I was doing and started to market myself on LinkedIn as well. Yeah. So I negotiated that as part of the day job. My LinkedIn presence, I guess, and my brand there was protected, as an asset of mine that was, I declared the side hustle and it was all okay for me to kind of represent myself and build that business in public on my LinkedIn. So it was then just marketing myself on LinkedIn. And so I worked with consultants, people running their own sort of solo consultancy businesses in the strategy space, to CEOs and kind of executive leaders, corporate leaders wanting to maybe position themselves for a new role or for something different, to then also founders of kind of B2B based, tech businesses or other businesses like that. So bit of a mix really of different people that I've been writing for.
And so the problem they had was they knew they needed to reach customers or influence people or, whatever. But they hated writing content. They probably had a load of imposter syndrome about it as well to stop them wanting to post. So they hired you to write the stuff for them, and then they checked it all and they posted it too. Or you even post it?
Yeah, mix. So I do offer that service of actually going in and scheduling the content and engaging with the community and all that kind of thing on behalf of the client. In most cases, I just supply the copy, the content, and they'll publish it themselves. But yeah, look, most of us face this idea I think of as FOPO, like fear of posting online, fear of other people's opinions. It's kind of imposter syndrome, but it's that fear of what someone's going to say. If we do stick our head above the parapet and share an idea. So, and then a lot of people aren't natural writers, or it takes them a long time to write something that they're happy with, which is time that we simply don't have. So having a chat to someone for an hour and a half, and then having them turn those ideas into content that you're happy with is a valuable service for those kind of people.
And you say you've just really built that through really referral and a bit of reach out. It's really, really great.
Yeah, look, I mean, LinkedIn is my marketing engine. So I market myself kind of exclusively on LinkedIn, and I guess the odd podcast now here and there. But LinkedIn is very much the channel I use to offer my services and to develop the business. And it is good. Like there's an element of stability to it. There is, compared to a kind of a never-ending salary, there feels often like there's a lot of instability to it as well. But in kind of, I guess, moving into this space, I had to do a lot of reflection and kind of planning and budgeting, and I maintained my day job for 12 months as I kind of proved out that this service was valuable and that I could, it's kind of one thing to sell a 3-month package, but it's another to renew that package and to renew it for another, and kind of build a steady stream. So I wanted to kind of prove to myself over a period of time that there was kind of a viable pipeline there. And then it was looking on the other side of the equation of what, minimum viable life is the term that I've come up with. What's kind of the minimum we need as a household to survive? And can I, with the results I've gotten from my kind of 12-month experiment doing this as a side hustle, how does that sit against the minimum viable amount we'd need to sustain a lifestyle?
Cool. So what sort of things go into that minimum viable life for you? And obviously they'll be different for everyone, but what, like, give us a sort of clue around what the minimum would be for you to.
Yeah. So I look at, I'm a big fan of the 80-20 rule. Like, this isn't about documenting, your 2 flat whites a week and your Netflix subscription and stuff. It's very much at a high level, like, what are the big picture pieces? And so, for most people, it's going to be your mortgage or your rent is going to be a key thing. For us with young kids, childcare is kind of the next big thing. So I look at sort of subscriptions almost, or think of them like subscriptions, those recurring costs that you can't really opt out of. So for us, mortgage, childcare, we don't have car loans or any other debt, anything like that, but that would be another big factor. And then for me, and the way we looked at it was really just to take all those big pieces like the 80-20 rule, and then add, maybe another third on top for your miscellaneous, for your, to feed yourself and insurance and all that kind of thing. And that gives you a feel for a number that, that's not this is your minimum viable life. Like, this is not having a big annual holiday and buying a new car and planning a wedding. Like, this is if I was to quit my job and to do this, what's kind of the minimum we could get by on without making huge sacrifices either. And just seeing what that looks like, I guess, seeing it on paper is really helpful. That will give you a sensation of like if you're thinking about escaping from corporate, there'll be a number on the page and you'll be like, well, this idea I've got, like, that feels like a huge number every month, or, I could do that every month. So it was a super interesting exercise. And then obviously the other factor is, if you have a partner, what can their salary or any other income that you've got from property or whatever it might be, how much of that tops up the minimum viable life? And so what's your shortfall that you would need to cover?
It might be helpful to share some ideas with people that are thinking about leaving, and and maybe are concerned about them having to rely on themselves for the first time rather than the career in the corporate name that they carry, and just some of the work you do with clients, but also some of the work you've done for yourself to build your own identity, your own sort of personal brand, and what sort of techniques and tactics you use to do that might make people feel a bit more relaxed about going there. That this shouldn't be a barrier to moving if that's what they choose to do. This is actually something quite practical that anyone could do, and maybe like you, many people could do before they even leave too, to de-risk things even further.
There's every chance you are going to need to talk to a new audience, or an audience that you haven't spoken to in a while, whether it's old contacts from your professional network or a whole new segment of the market that doesn't know you yet. That's where LinkedIn is a super powerful tool. And that's where a lot of my work revolves. But I think, starting with the end in mind, like figuring out, what's that next thing? What have I got in mind? And so then, okay, who needs to know that this is my plan, or this is my offering, or this is what I want to be doing. In terms of, I guess, a slight distinction to make for me, I like to make the distinction between a personal brand as a noun, like it's something we all possess, it's something we all have. It's your reputation, whether you're actively curating it or doing anything with it or not. You do have a personal brand. The people that know you will have an opinion of you. The difference then is personal branding is the activity, the verb, the steps that you take to amplify that reputation. So I think that's kind of a key thing to recognize. You already have a personal brand, you already have a reputation with those that know you. But do you need to be taking steps to, I guess, amplify it with a new audience? Look, we touched on, maybe just to get really specific and kind of granular around LinkedIn, we touched on FOPO, this fear that you've got an idea that you just can't get past kind of hitting that publish button. A really nice baby step into that, into showing up more consistently on LinkedIn is commenting. You can just start by leaving thoughtful comments on a post that resonates with you. If there's a lesson in there or a message in there, either just leaving a compliment for the person who wrote it, or building on the idea or reframing the idea, can be a nice, I guess, toe in the water to start getting comfortable with the idea of putting yourself out there online. And then beyond that, I would say, get your ego out of the way. No one else on the planet cares as much as what you do about what you're going to post. No one else is paying that much attention. So you've just got to kind of embrace it, I guess, and get comfortable with the idea that, kind of like what you're saying with your boss, in the office, like, you're a very small part of other people's lives, and your post on LinkedIn is a minute part of people's day-to-day lives. So there's no point agonizing over it. Just get into that habit of kind of sharing. When you can get yourself to the brink of it and you've written something, just go with it and kind of embrace that and get your ego out of the way, really. Writing's a really good way to figure out what you actually think about something, but it can often feel, for a lot of us, quite rambly or quite, scattered. It can be hard to sort of go back through and edit and just really, really get to a kind of a finished product that you're happy with. So I think that can be a bit of a barrier, because a lot of us now in corporate are talking a lot, rather than writing. And so it's not a medium that many of us, or that a lot of us, are familiar with or using day to day in any kind of extended way.
Right. Well, some really great tips there. Thanks very much, Joe. So let's set up with, where do people find you? I'm guessing LinkedIn is the main place people find you.
Yeah.
But where do people find out more about what you think, and some of the ideas you have around how you use LinkedIn and the ghostwriting services that you offer that may be quite appealing to people that don't want to step into this space but would much rather have a conversation with you than the World Wide Web?
Yeah, look, absolutely. LinkedIn is the place to find me. My inbox there is always open. Just search Joe McKay and you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Great. Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Joe. That's brilliant.
Thank you, Adam. Good to chat to you.